File 10.
It was bitter cold weather when Gottfried's grandmother was burned. It was charged that she had cured bad headaches by kneading the person's head and neck with her fingers, as she said, but really by the devil's help, as everybody knew. They were going to examine her, but she stopped them and confessed straight off that her power was from the devil. So they appointed to burn her the next morning, early, in our market square. The officer who was to prepare the fire was there first, and prepared it. She was there next, brought by the constables, who left her and went to fetch another witch. Her family did not come with her. They might be reviled, maybe stoned, if the people were excited. I came and gave her an apple. She was squatting at the fire, warming herself and waiting, and her old lips and hands were blue with the cold. A stranger came next. He was a traveller, passing through, and he spoke to her gently, and seeing nobody but me there to hear, said he was sorry for her, and he asked if what she confessed was true, and she said no. He looked surprised, but still more sorry then, and asked her, "Then why did you confess?" "I'm old and very poor," she said, "and I work for my living. There was no way but to confess. If I hadn't, they might have set me free. Well, that would ruin me, for no one would forget that I'd been suspected of being a witch, and so I would get no more work, and wherever I went they would set the dogs on me. In a little while I would starve. The fire is best. It is soon over. You've been good to me, you two, and I thank you." She snuggled closer to the fire and put out her hands to warm them, the snowflakes descending soft and still on her old grey head, and making it white and whiter. The crowd was gathering now, and an egg came flying and struck her in the eye, and broke and ran down her face. There was a laugh at that. I told Satan all about the 11 girls and the old woman once, but it did not affect him. He only said it was the human race, and what the human race did was of no consequence. And he said he had seen it made, and it was not made of clay. It was made of mud. A part of it was, anyway. I knew what he meant by that. The moral sense. He saw the thought in my head, and it tickled him and made him laugh. Then he called a bullock out of a pasture, and petted it and talked with it, and said, "There, he wouldn't drive children mad with hunger and fright and loneliness, and then burn them for confessing to things invented for them which had never happened. And neither would he break the hearts of the innocent poor old women, and make them afraid to trust themselves among their own race, and he would not insult them in their death agony. For he's not besmirched with the moral sense, but is as the angels are, and knows no wrong, and never does it." Lovely as he was, Satan could be cruelly offensive when he chose, and he always chose when the human race was brought to his attention. He always turned up his nose at it, and never had a kind word for it. Well, as I was saying, we boys doubted if it was a good time for Ursula to be hiring a member of the Narr family. We were right. When the people found it out, they were naturally indignant. And moreover, since Margit and Ursula hadn't enough to eat themselves, where was the money coming from to feed another mouth? That is what they wanted to know, and in order to find out, They stopped avoiding Gottfried and began to seek his society, and have sociable conversations with him. He was pleased, not thinking any harm, and not seeing the trap, and so he talked innocently along, and was no discreeter than a cow. "Money," he said, "oh, they've got plenty of it. They pay me 2 groschen a week besides my keep, and they live on the fat of the land, I can tell you. The prince himself can't beat their table." This astonishing statement was conveyed by the astrologer to Father Adolf on a Sunday morning when he was returning from Mass. He was deeply moved and said, "Oh, this must be looked into." He said there must be witchcraft at the bottom of it, and told the villagers to resume relations with Margit and Ursula in a private and unostentatious way, and keep both eyes open. They were told to keep their own counsel, and not rouse the suspicions of the household. The villagers were at first a bit reluctant to enter such a dreadful place, but the priest said they would be under his protection while there, and no harm could come to them, particularly if they carried a trifle of holy water along, and kept their heads and crosses handy. This satisfied them, and made them willing to go. Envy and malice made the baser sort even eager to go. And so poor Margit began to have company again, and was as pleased as a cat. She was like most anybody else, just human and happy in her prosperities, and not averse from showing them off a little. And she was humanly grateful to have the warm shoulder turned to her, and be smiled upon by her friends and the village again. For of all the hard things to bear, to be cut by your neighbours and left in contemptuous solitude is maybe the hardest. The bars were down, and we could all go there now, and we did, our parents and all, day after day. The cat began to strain herself. She provided the top of everything for those companies, and in abundance, among them many a dish and many a wine which they had not tasted before, and which they had not even heard of, except at second hand from the prince's servants. And the tableware was much above ordinary too. Margit was troubled at times, and pursued Ursula with questions to an uncomfortable degree, but Ursula stood her ground and stuck to it that it was Providence, and said no word about the cat. Margit knew that nothing was impossible to Providence, but she could not help having doubts that this effort was from there, though she was afraid to say so, lest disaster come of it. Witchcraft occurred to her, but she put the thought aside, for this was before Gottfried joined the household, and she knew Ursula was pious and a bitter hater of witches. By the time Gottfried arrived, Providence was established, unshakably entrenched, and getting all the gratitude. The cat made no murmur, but went on composedly improving in style and prodigality by experience. In any community, big or little, there is always a fair proportion of people who are not malicious or unkind by nature, and who never do unkind things, except when they are overmastered by fear, or when their self-interest is greatly in danger, or some such matter as that. Eseldorf had its proportion of such people, and ordinarily their good and gentle influence was felt. But these were not ordinary times, on account of the witch-dread, and so we did not seem to have any gentle and compassionate hearts left, to speak of. Every person was frightened at the unaccountable state of things at Margit's house, not doubting that witchcraft was at the bottom of it, and fright frenzied their reason. Naturally, There were some who pitied Marget and Ursula for the danger that was gathering about them, but naturally they did not say so. It would not have been safe. So the others had it all their own way, and there was none to advise the ignorant girl and the foolish woman, and warn them to modify their doings. We boys wanted to warn them, but we backed down when it came to the pinch, being afraid. We found that we were not manly enough, nor brave enough to do a generous action when there was a chance that it could get us into trouble. Neither of us confessed this poor spirit to the others, but did as other people would have done, dropped the subject and talked about something else. And I knew we all felt mean, eating and drinking Marget's fine things, along with those companies of spies, and petting her and complimenting her with the rest, and seeing with self-reproach how foolishly happy she was, and never saying a word to put her on her guard. And indeed she was happy, and as proud as a princess, and so grateful to have friends again. And all the time these people were watching with all their eyes, and reporting all they saw to Father Adolf. But he couldn't make head or tail of the situation. There must be an enchanter somewhere on the premises, but who was it? Marget was not seen to do any jugglery, nor was Ursula, nor yet Gottfried, and still the wines and dainties never ran short, and a guest could not call for a thing and not get it. To produce these effects was usual enough with witches and enchanters. That part of it was not new. But to do it without any incantations, or even any rumblings, or earthquakes, or lightnings, or apparitions, that was new, novel, wholly irregular. There was nothing in the books like this. Enchanted things were always unreal. Gold turned to dirt in an unenchanted atmosphere, food withered away and vanished. But this test failed in the present case. The spies brought samples. Father Adolf prayed over them, exorcised them, but it did no good. They remained sound and real. They yielded to natural decay only, and took the usual time to do it. Father Adolf was not merely puzzled, he was also exasperated, for these evidences very nearly convinced him, privately, that there was no witchcraft in the matter. It did not wholly convince him, for this could be a new kind of witchcraft. There was a way to find out as to this. If this prodigal abundance of provender was not brought in from the outside, but produced on the premises, there was witchcraft.